Welcome back, everyone. For today's video, we are going to be taking a look at my tiebreak match that I played in the FIDE World Cup, which is being held here in Baku, Azerbaijan. Now, as you guys know, I drew both of my classical games against Karthik Venkataraman, and today we play two more games of rapid chess with 25 minutes plus 10-second increment for move 1. Now, if the match is tied after two rapid games, we play a quicker time control, quicker and quicker and quicker, down to the end. Now, obviously for me, I'm hoping that I don't have to expend a ton of energy and play more than two games. So let's jump right into the action. So in the first game, I'm playing with white pieces, just like in the classical portion. That's sometimes an advantage, sometimes not. If you're able to win the game with white, then your opponent is under a lot of pressure. If it's a draw, then you're definitely trying to defend in the second game with black, where if you do lose, you are simply eliminated. So I play knight to f3, d5 is played, and now I decide to play e3. Now, the reasoning behind me playing this opening setup was twofold. First of all, my general impression of my opponent is that he's done a lot of opening work. He's very well prepared, and so he's clearly going to be ready for some straightforward system that I can play, whether it be e4 or d4, whereas I can play knight f3 and e3, and hopefully he won't be able to blitz out a lot of moves quickly. He'll have to think from the start, but then secondly, it also potentially gives me the opportunity to save some of my preparation for later rounds. So I play e3, we get c5, I play b3, knight to c6, and now I play bishop b2, all pretty standard. We get a6, and now I play this move bishop to e2. Now there are a couple options here. I can play g3, I can play d4, c4, or bishop e2 like in the game. Now after bishop to e2, black does have an extra option here where he can play d4 to try and claim the big black center after castles and a move like e5 here, trying to take advantage of the fact that I haven't pushed my pawns to d4 or e4. However, Karthik doesn't want to spend a lot of time. It is a rapid game. You have to figure out where to use that time, where to just make quick moves, and so he plays knight f6. I play d4 here. He takes, I take back the knight, and now he plays bishop d7 very quickly. Now, it was also clear to me that even though I'm not sure if he was well within his preparation, he had looked at a line similar to this because all of his moves were coming very quickly. cd4 and bishop d7 he played right away. So here I decide to castle. He plays the move e6, and now I play knight back to f3. Now, the reasoning behind knight f3 here is that what I want to do is I want to keep all of the pieces on the board, try to keep the game going as long as I can, and not give my opponent any easy decisions. For example, he could have traded on d4 himself and then played e6 followed by bishop to e7, but if he does do this right away here after knight d2, bishop e7, let's say rook d1 castles and c4, very quickly I'm getting the rooks to the d and the c files, the center is opening up, my bishops are going to be very, very well placed on both of these diagonals, and so it's very tricky for black to play. So he plays e6, knight f3, bishop c5, I play knight bd2, he castles, and now I play c4, trying to get rid of this slight weakness. I was wondering if he could have played b5 here to try to prevent c4, but I think c4 is still quite good here after takes, and castles, because now I have this extra square on b3 for the knight to hit the bishop on c5, and if he moves the bishop away, I can even trade the bishop for the knight, and then win a pawn here in the center of the board. So he decides to castle, I go c4, queen e7, and now I play the move a3 here, trying to play b4 and expand on the queen side. And now Karthik plays this move d takes c4. Now, I don't know if this move is actually a mistake per se, but I think it was better to waste the tempo potentially and play a5, stopping my queen side expansion here, because now I can never move the rook away from a1, because then I hang the pawn on a3. I can't play b4 either, and I don't know if this is great, but I thought a5 made a little bit more sense. So instead he takes on c4, I play b4 attacking the bishop. He moves the bishop away, I take on c4, and now I have a slight spatial advantage here because the pawns are on a3 and b4, and my bishops are maybe a little bit better than his bishops potentially here as well. So the game continues with rook d8. I play bishop d3 here, trying to activate D's bishops on D's diagonals. He plays bishop e8. I go queen to e2, breaking the pin on the d file. Plays rook a c8, and now I go rook a c1. Now, up to this point, I'm pretty happy with the position I have here. It's very easy for me to play. My bishops are well placed. They have very obvious threats on the diagonals. Really, the only question for me here is how to sort of improve the position. Is it going to be e4 and e5? Will it be a4, b5 somewhere? That is really the big question that I will have to figure out. So we get h6. I play rook f d1. b5 played, knight d2, and now Karthik plays bishop b6, and here I play this move h3. Now, originally, I wanted to play a move like e4 here, but I was kind of bothered by this idea of knight g4 putting a lot of pressure on this pawn at f2, and so I thought after h3, I would be able to play e4. Now, this was a slight oversight, because after h3, knight a7 is played, I thought that I could play e4 here, but there's actually the knight jump to h5, and the knight is going to either f4 or g3 here, and it's quite difficult to play. So in retrospect, I don't know, maybe I still would have played h3 anyway, but h3 was a flawed concept because the idea was to play e4 on the next turn because knight g4 is no longer available, but after knight a7, it's still not an option. Now, knight a7 is a great move here because if you look at the position, white has a little bit more space, and generally the basic rules of chess as they apply at the higher levels is that if your opponent has more space, you look for pawn breaks, or you try to trade off the bishops and the knights or the heavy pieces, the rooks and the queen. So a5 is not really a move here because after takes bishop b5, white is simply up a pawn. So you don't have the pawn break with a5. So what is the next best idea? It is to play knight a7 and try to trade off the rooks. So here I play knight to e5, trying to claim some space in the center. The rooks come off the board. He plays a5 here. I take on a5, and now I play knight to b3, attacking the bishop. He goes bishop b6, and now I play knight d4. Now, the position is still relatively balanced, but with these knights in the center of the board, the knights attacking the pawn on b5, maybe knight 6 jumps, I felt a little bit optimistic. Now, the reason that a5 is a good move here is because now, after b4, all the pawns on the queen side have come off the board. So even though I'm going to end up in this position here where I have two bishops versus a bishop and a knight, with no pawns on the queen side, it's very difficult to prove that this is better or that this is winning. So here queen e7 is played. I go bishop to b1, knight to b5, and now I go bishop b2, trying to showcase the power of the bishops on the very long diagonals and trying to make sure that this knight can't jump anywhere. So we get rook to c8. I play e4 here, trying to take some more space. I really want to play e5 here to open up this diagonal. I'd love to play queen d3 and queen h7, for example, but if I go queen d3, black can simply go queen d7, offering the trade of the queens. And if I go queen c2 here, after knight to d6, bishop takes f6, g takes f6. I think black is okay here. Even though it looks very scary on first glance, black is actually doing very well because of this pin on the c file. So I would love to create the double A battery on the diagonal, but it's not effective. So when I play e4, what I'm trying to do is play e5, which first of all gives me the idea of hooking the knight, but then also going queen e4 and queen h7. We get knight d7, I play e5 here, trying to open up the diagonal, and now we get knight to f8, stopping all of the threats with queen h7 down the road. However, there is one drawback, which is that with the pawn on e5, knight d6 is a very serious threat, so the knight is kind of stuck on b5, preventing this move. So here I go bishop d3, queen g5, and now I play rook f1. Now, the main thing about this position is that I'm a little bit better here, but the game is going to drag on forever due to the fact that I have the bishop pair, and I'm hoping that as we get lower on time, eventually I can keep squeezing and prove that I have an advantage. So we get rook d8, I play f4, supporting the pawn on e5, queen to e7, and now I go king to h2, plays queen c5, and now I play this move rook to c1. Here, Karthik plays knight d4, and this is the start, I would say, of where my opponent starts to make some mistakes, and it starts to get a little bit tricky. After knight d4, queen to f1, black is still probably okay, but you have to be extremely precise. And the best move here is to play knight f5, which is very counterintuitive because there's knight to d6 here. Actually, maybe it's not the best move. I saw it said it was best. Maybe my weak computer engine isn't so great, because it was saying knight f5 is fine, but it's actually not. So the reason knight d4 is probably things start to get tricky is because the knight is always stopping knight d6. So if black were to play queen a7, for example, you still don't have a knight d6 idea, but after knight d4, queen f1, now if you go back to b5, there's knight d6 with the discovery of the queen, and this will win some material. Additionally, knight f5, knight d6 is also probably going to win some material, although maybe queen b6 is still okay for black, but after bishop a3, my bishops are very active. I've got a great knight on d6, and there is quite a bit of pressure. So Karthik plays knight b3, I go bishop a3, and now he plays this move queen a7, which is a huge mistake. Now the best move here is to play either queen c7 or queen c8. I think during the game, I was expecting the queen to go to c7, and if after queen to c7, if I play rook c3 here, there's knight to d2 with this very tricky discovery, or I guess taking advantage of the pin. I can't take the knight because then I lose the rook. And after queen c1, with knights coming off the board here, white is still quite a bit better, but it's not winning. However, when Karthik played queen a7, in my mind, I was expecting the queen to be on the c file, and so I played this move rook d1 very quickly, which is an epic fail. If I had played rook c3 here, I probably would have won this game. And the reason is that now after knight d4, I get knight to d6, creating the classic bastion here. The knight is guarded by the two pawns. Bishops are very active. Black has no way really to get rid of this knight. And eventually, I'll probably play f5, bishop c4, and there are going to be all kinds of threats, or even do the rook lift with rook g3. And it's just very, very difficult to play. So when I played rook d1 and rook d5 occurred on the board, I suddenly realized what I had done wrong, where I was supposed to play rook c3 instead. And the reason now is that if I can't really get knight d6 in because there's queen a3, and if I go bishop d6, black can play bishop b5, getting rid of the passive bishop for either the knight or trading the bishop for the bishop on d3. And now it's one less set of pieces on the board, and it becomes a much easier task to defend the position for black. So I decided to take, trying to be practical here, and just use the bastion with the knight on d6 here. We get queen to e3. I go back. He plays queen a7, and now I play rook to b1. Now, one really annoying thing here was that in this position, Karthik was very close to playing this move, knight to c5. In fact, he went to reach for the knight to play the move, and then he stopped himself just in time. If he had played knight c5 here, he would have lost the game on the spot after rook to a1 with these rook a8 ideas. And if you go queen b7, stop. Actually, not queen b7. Sorry, queen b7 hangs the queen. If you go queen to b8, stopping rook to a8 here. After bishop e2 with the idea of bishop to f3 and rook to a8, we're going to get the classic right triangle, and of course, white is much better. So he stopped himself. He found queen e3. I play knight c4, queen a7, rook to b1, and once again, Karthik finds his best move, knight to d2, sacrificing the knight temporarily, but getting rid of one more piece on the board. Now, this was an excellent move, and I think those of you guys who are watching the live broadcast on my channel on Kick, you probably saw me getting visibly frustrated as I was starting to wonder what is going on. This guy just keeps finding these moves. It's just so annoying because there is a lot online. There's a lot of pressure, but that's just what happens sometimes. Sometimes players are underrated and or they're feeling the rhythm, for lack of a better way of putting it. So I play knight d2, queen to e3, I go knight c4, but now after queen takes d3, even though I'm getting the outpost with the knight on d6, it's not enough because he has a rook and a bishop, and I have a rook and a knight. And my opponent just keeps finding the best moves. He plays bishop c6, rook c1, and now he goes bishop d7. Another incredible move. I was a little bit hopeful here that he would play bishop d5. And after rook c8, king to e7, I have check, king d7, rook f8. And while this is still probably a draw, there are chances for me to win the game. Instead, he plays bishop d7. I go h4 here, trying to play h5 maybe. He plays king e7, rook c7, and now he goes f6. A great move, trying to break up the pawn chain here and loosen the knight, which is guarded on d6. I go e takes f6 here. I didn't want to play this move. I really wanted to play rook a7, but after takes, and rook d5, suddenly the pawn on e5 is very loose. If I go knight c4 here, he can play rook b5, stopping knight b6, and I simply have no way to improve the position here, and the game will be a draw. So I decided to take, hoping that maybe I'll see a free horse here on d6. If you were to take the horse, I sack the rook, and after king takes d7, f takes g7, I'm going to promote the pawn to a queen and win the game. So he takes back. I go knight to b7 here, trying to go knight c5, trying to use this pin to some sort of end. But Karthik plays h5, a great move here, by the way. It's a scary move to play too, because if you're wrong here in calculating the tempos, you could lose. For example, after g4 takes knight c5, if black were to play rook d5 here, for example, I can... not rook d5, sorry, let's just say rook d4. After h5, rook d5, I can now trade everything down, and the h-pawn runs to h8, and I win the game. Unfortunately, after g4 takes knight c5 here, black can play this move rook to h3 check, king g2, and then king d6, breaking the pin, attacking the rook and the knight, and after I take and he takes, he simply will win the game because he has 3 pawns versus 2. So, I play king g1, rook d1, king f2, trying to just keep the game going on forever. Just dawdling here. I play g3. He plays e5. I take, and now he plays rook e5, which is a great move. He was very close once again to playing pawn takes pawn, which would have been a mistake. So after king to e4, now it gets tricky. The position is still probably a draw with correct play, but if, for example, you play rook b5 to guard the pawn, then there's knight d6 forking the king and the rook. And after rook to d1, king e5, bishop g4, it should be a draw, but the show goes on, and I will eventually have an endgame where I have a rook knight and 2 pawns versus rook bishop and 1, and I think I would have excellent chances to win. So he almost blunders, but again, he stops himself and he takes with the rook. And at this point, I'm just like so shocked. I'm just thinking to myself, what is this guy doing? Does he just never play tournaments? Because he's just finding these amazing moves. And it's just, my general take and overall is that this guy, he's not playing enough tournaments, or he's not playing enough tournaments. It has to be the reasoning, because as soon as he does, his rating is going to gap. So he takes with the rook, plays bishop e6, amazing move here. Very easy here to blunder, for example, with bishop g4, and after knight d6, king f8, rook f7. Once again, this should be a draw, but we're going to get an endgame where I have a rook knight and 2 versus rook bishop and 1. So he plays bishop e6. I play knight c5, goes bishop f5. Perfect move, dominating the horse. Knight doesn't have any jumps here. I play knight b7, he goes back, I play knight c5, and now I play rook a7. And here the game probably should end in a draw. In fact, it was very close to being a draw. I keep trying to improve the position to no avail. We finally get to this critical moment with knight e7, where I'm hoping that he'll play rook takes g3 and walk into knight g8, which would be checkmate, and I would win the game. Of course, he plays bishop h7. Perfect move. Stops knight f5, and it also stops knight to g8. I go king d6. He plays rook e1, just keeping the king cut off. I can't bring the king closer. And we play quite a few more moves. The game should once again end in a draw. But finally, we get to this moment here where Karthik cracks completely. Now, probably it's just the pressure of being in the moment, but at this point, I was expecting him to play rook takes g3, rook f6, and bishop g6, and the game to end in a draw. But due to the pressure getting low on time, Karthik here, I think, panicked, and he, for whatever reason, he just missed bishop g6. He just didn't see it in his mind. He only saw king g7, knight takes h5, which would win the game for me. And so he spent time. He finally cracks, but unfortunately for me, even though he finally cracks after I've been pressing for so many moves, it's still not enough to win the game. So I take, he goes king h7, I check, he goes here, and now I make this mistake of playing knight takes h5. What I should have done in this position is played rook to c7 to exchange the rooks. Now, it's still a draw here, but black does have to be very careful in that if we get to a position like this, for example, after king e5, after king g7, it's a draw. But if black were to play bishop f3, white is actually winning here, because I can go king f6, bishop g4, and I can route the horse around to where it gets this f5 square. If black takes, then I win this pawn at h5 with the two pawns. I simply win. And if black goes king h7, king g5, let's just say bishop e8, now I can reroute the horse once again, where I reroute the horse to f4, and I capture this pawn on h5, and I will win the game. So I should have done this. Now, mind you, it's still a draw with precise play, but there are practical chances, whereas in the game, once I take on h5 and he gets bishop g6, the game will end in a draw. If I play g4, he'll take and go rook c4. The two pawns on the edge, nothing I can do. And after knight f4, rook g3, at the very least, black can probably sack the bishop for the h pawn, if not the rook for the knight and the pawn. So the game continues quite a bit longer. The main reason for this is that it's a match format. In a match format, you never want to you never want to sort of give up on the position before it's the very end. You want to squeeze it as long as you can. And Magnus Carlsen actually in his World Championship match against Fabiano Caruana did a very similar thing where he continued to play the game out even though it was going to be a draw for another 10, 15, 20 moves just to sort of show his opponent or show Fabiano that he was going to have to work for every game, for every move, for the entire match. So that was in my mind here, which is the reason I did not take the draw. So I play h5, he goes bishop c2. The game continues. Obviously, it should be a draw at many times, or at many points, but here he decides to sack the rook for the knight and the pawn, and the rest is very straightforward. I play on for many, many more moves, but the game eventually ends peacefully in a draw here. I'll just show you guys the final position. No need really to explain why. Where eventually I check and I play this move rook to h4, and it's simply stalemate. King can't move anywhere, bishop can't move anywhere, and if your opponent has no moves, then it is a draw. So, first game is a draw. I press forever. It's a 144 move. Now, after the game ended, there was only a 10-minute break, so I very briefly spoke to Chris Littlejohn, my second, and he did tell me that rook c3 was winning, which I was already in a bad mood, but that kind of even made me more unhappy. And so now, after a very abridged gap of only 10 minutes, basically run, use the restroom, talk for a minute, and then go back through security, we play the second game. Now, in this situation, I'm playing with the black pieces. Very, very, very dicey situation, because obviously I'm unhappy. I know I had a chance. I could not win that first game. I could not break through my opponent's defenses. And now I'm playing black in the second game. Now, Karthik plays knight f3, and I decided to play d5. We get d4, e6, c4, and I play c5. This, of course, is the Tarrasch, or the trash defense, as we like to call it, where black pushes these pawns in the center right away. Now, I decided to play this because this was my preparation for this game. But before the game started, I was a little bit unsure whether I should play this, because my general read of Karthik Venkataraman and its play is that he is a very good positional player. His intuition, as we saw in this first wrap game, at the critical moments, he's very close to making blunders. He's able to reel it in, find the correct moves, defend like a boss. And so my general read is that he's a very, very good positional player. And so going into something very positional like this didn't feel right, but I decided it's what I prepared. I should play it anyway. So we get takes g3. He fianchettos the bishop to g2. All these moves very standard so far. He goes a3, and here I decide to castle, which is a slight mistake. I believe that knight e4 and a5 are both considered to be a little bit better. Anyway, I decide to castle. He goes b4. I play bishop b6. We get bishop b2, and now I play this move bishop g4. Now, all these moves I was blitzing out, even though at this point I felt that I had done something wrong. So I think the best way best way of putting it is that I was feeling a little bit of tilt and frustration in terms of what happened in the previous game. So we get knight c3, I play rook to e8, trying to put pressure on the pawn on e2, trying to use both of these diagonals, but it's simply a little bit worse here due to the isolated pawn in the center. So Karthik plays knight a4, trying to trade the knight for the bishop and open up the scope for this bishop on b2. Here I decide to play bishop c7, and now he plays knight c5, and I play this horrible move, rook b8. Now again, I was simply trying to make moves. I wasn't really feeling the flow, wasn't really calculating, but I probably should have gone b6 here. And after knight to d3, for example, I can play rook c8, rook c1, and bishop to b8, or bishop d6. And white's a little bit better again because of the isolated pawn, but I do have chances to survive the game. Instead, I play rook b8 quickly. He goes rook c1. I play knight to e5. And now Karthik uses about 6 minutes before playing bishop takes e5. And when he played this move, I was very happy. Because as soon as I played knight e5, I realized that he could play this move h3. And the position is absolutely miserable for me. If I trade the knights on f3, he takes with a pawn. And after, say, bishop f5, for example, after f4, white has this great bishop. Both of the bishops actually are very well placed. My bishop on c7 is terrible. I have problems on the c file. My rooks are passive, weak pawn. And I think there's a very good chance that I would have lost this game if he had played this. But he plays bishop takes e5 after a 6-minute thing, and I breathe a sigh of relief because after I take and he plays h3, I thought that after takes e takes f3, I should be able to draw this game I don't want to say very easily, but I felt like it should be a draw with correct play, or the serious danger is gone. Now, computer actually agrees with me, which is interesting, but it does not like the move that I played. So I played a5 here for a very simple reason. In this position, the material is even, but I have a couple of weaknesses. First of all, I have this weak pawn on d5, this isolated pawn in the center, but also there are all these pawns on the queen side. So similar to the first rapid game where he was trying to trade off all the pawns on one side, I try to trade off the pawns on the queen side because if we get to some position, I'll just illustrate what I mean by this. How do I do this, I guess? I'll just illustrate this in a very non-standard way just to show you guys how we get here. But let's just say we get some position like this, for example. Just set up some position like this, okay? And now, of course, ignore the bar, you guys, but the point is if we get to an endgame where white has 4 pawns and I have 3 pawns on the king side, there should always be pretty good practical drawing chances. So when we get to this position after a5, if I can liquidate the 2 queenside pawns, just trade the a and b pawns off the board, I feel like I should be able to draw it, which is why I played a5. Here, Karthik plays queen b3. I trade the first set of pawns, and now I play this very committal move g5. Now, what's amazing about this move is the computer actually likes it. Now, during the game, I did not love this move. I really didn't want to play this move, in fact, but I felt like if white gets f4 here and he can open up this diagonal, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble no matter what I do. If he, for example, a position like this, with this open diagonal, this weak pawn in the center, all of white's moves are very easy and straightforward, and I have no easy moves, and I'm suffering in this position. So I decided to play g5 here to stop f4. It's kind of an ugly move, but if I can keep this bishop hemmed in where there's no scope, maybe I can do something down the road. So we get rook f d1. I play bishop d6 here. We get queen d3. I play queen e7, queen d2, play h6 to protect the pawn. We get rook e1, queen f8. Decides to go queen d4, and now I play this move rook e1 and queen g7. Now, what I should have played here was this move rook e8, and I did actually consider this move, but for whatever reason, I thought after takes, queen takes d5, I didn't think I was going to be able to trade these 2 pawns. But as it turns out, after b6 here, if white goes knight d7, queen e7, knight b6, and bishop to b4, now we've reached the endgame where it's 4 versus 3, and I should have very good drawing chances due to the pawns being all on the same side, but also the bishops are of the opposite color, and for that reason, I should draw this without too much difficulty. Instead, I play queen g7. Now Karthik plays bishop f1, trying to reroute the bishop, because if he can't play f4 and scope the pawn, then bishop f1 to go to either d3 or b5 makes a lot of sense here. Play h5, he goes bishop d3, and now I play this move h4. Now, bishop d3 apparently is a mistake. I don't know why. Probably if I were playing here, I think h4 would have made more sense from him to prevent me from being able to break up this pawn chain. And I think after h4, it's very unpleasant to play. But he plays bishop d3, I play h4, and I think the reason that Karthik played bishop d3 is probably he miscalculated this line. So he decides to take this pawn on h4. Now, he spent a lot of time here. I was actually expecting him to play g4. In this position, this is completely what I was expecting. But after g4 here, I can probably play a move like bishop to f8, followed by rook to e8 or b6. And it's not really clear how white is going to improve the position. But Karthik spends a lot of time before taking. I think in my mind, I told myself I was down 4 minutes at this point in the game, I told myself, make sure you have your next move ready, regardless of whether he plays G4 or GH4. So when he takes, I had a move ready, but this was one of those situations where having the move ready was not as important as simply using the time. So here I play Queen H6, which is a mistake. What I should have played here is I probably should have played either B6 here or played Knight to H5. Now, the reason Knight H5 is such a nice move is because after White trades the queens and takes on G5, temporarily White has 2 extra pawns here, but he has stacked pawns on F2 and F3. And after Knight F4, Bishop to F5 here, I can go Rook H8 with the idea of Rook H5, taking the pawn on G5. And at the end of the day, White is probably not even really better here. One sample line is Knight takes B7, Bishop B4, Rook D1, and after Rook to H5 here, White is going to end up in a situation here where he has these 3 pawns versus these 2, but he's got a bad knight that's kind of dominated by my bishop on b4, and my knight on f4 is a golden god here. So I should have played knight h5, but instead I play queen h6. We get bishop f5. I take here. He goes king h1, trying to open up the g file for the rook. I go rook e8 here. Get rook g1, king f8, and now he finds this great move, knight to d3. When Karthik was thinking in this position here after rook to e8, I was pretty sure he was going to trade the rooks and the game was going to end in a draw. And then when he played rook g1 and found knight d3, I was just shocked because knight d3 is not an obvious move. The move that you want to play here as a human is this move rook to g6, sacking the rook. But after queen c1, you can play rook g1, and then I go queen f4, threatening the mate on h2. And if white plays king g2, now I can play bishop to e5. The rook guards the bishop, and now I will simply capture the rook next turn. If I take here, I lose the game. But after bishop e5, the rook guards the bishop. There's no knight d7 here. And when white takes a pawn, I simply take the rook because the bishop guards the knight, and I win the game. So we get knight to d3 played here by Karthik, and now I play queen h5. And the reason knight d3 is so good is it stops everything. It stops me from playing rook e1, it stops me from playing queen to c1, but it also stops me from playing queen to f4 as well. So it basically covers the 3 squares that I want to use in this position. I want queen f4, I want queen c1, or rook to e1. So he plays knight d3. I go queen h5. He plays bishop g4. He could have played queen f6 here, by the way, but this would be a draw after takes. Rook g2. No rook e1 because the knight covers, and I can check and make a repetition here, and the game will end peacefully. Instead, Karthik decides to play bishop g4. I go queen h6, bishop f5, queen h5, bishop g4, queen h6, and now he plays this move b5 very quickly. Now, the mistake probably for Karthik is that he used too much time here. At this point after queen h5, he was only down 25 seconds, but when he plays bishop g4 and uses 3 minutes and 20 seconds, now he's down a lot of time on the clock, and he has to be very, very precise. And I think this is a moment where he threw away his best winning chances, because now after b5, rook to e7 here, he plays this move bishop c8. And I go rook c7, bishop f5, and now I can play rook c4. Now, rook c4 is a blunder, but all of my moves here are becoming a lot easier. After I go rook e7, I simply want to play knight e8 and queen to f6, for example, or go rook c7. And so now white has to prove the advantage, and now you've used a lot of time, and it gets difficult to play. So he plays bishop c8. I go rook c7, bishop f5, and now I blunder with rook c4. What I should have played here was queen to h5, which I actually did see this move. But I thought after bishop g4, queen to h6, we're in a similar situation where white can again go b6, and I haven't really improved the position all that much. So I decided to play rook c4, going for it, overlooking the winning move here. In this position, Karthik plays queen b6, which is a huge mistake. After queen to a1, white is actually winning here, and the reason is because I can no longer bring the rook back to the 8th rank to stop a check, whereas in the previous position, if you look at some position like this, just to illustrate the reason, let's just say I go rook e2. If white plays queen 8, I can always block with the rook or the knight here, and both pieces will still be well placed, and I'm not losing on the spot. But when I play rook c4 and queen a1 could happen, I can't drop the rook back, and this position is just GG. After knight to e8, rook to e1, white is simply winning here. The threat is this overwhelming move, queen to a8. If I go knight f6 back, now there's queen to a8, king g7, and rook to g1, and I'll have to give up a lot of material, and I will lose the game. So in this position, I didn't even see queen a1, honestly. If I'd seen it, I wouldn't have played rook c4, but I did see queen b6, which is what Karthik played. It's the natural-looking move here because you attack both the pawn and the bishop at the same time. But now after knight to e8, it gets very tricky here because now the knight holds the bishop. There are no checks on the 8th rank, and I can bring the queen to f6 and put pressure on these pawns on f2 and f3. So Karthik plays queen takes b7, which is a mistake. Now, I do think, like I said before, if Karthik has 3-4 more minutes here, I think he would have found queen to a1. But because he had gotten low on time, he plays queen b6 quickly, and now, without all that time, he finally starts to blunder away the game. plays queen takes b7. I go queen to f6 here, and now he plays this move queen to d7 after a very, very long think here of nearly 2 minutes. Now, what I suspect my opponent missed was that after queen takes d5, I have rook d4 here. Queen guards the rook, and the queen is simply overloaded. There's no way to guard this bishop and or the knight. You can't go to c5, so I take the queen. e5, same thing. You move away, I take the bishop. And with the queen overloaded, it's simply GG, why not? To make matters worse, if you play bishop g4, I can sack the rook with rook takes g4, and after rook g4, queen to f3, king g1. I can either take the knight here, maybe queen h3 also is playable. Either way, a position like this is going to be very, very hard to play with limited time on the clock. I have a bishop and knight for the rook, and I think in any practical world, I should win this game. So, Karthik uses all his time, and he plays queen d7 instead, but now I have rook c7, trapping the queen on d7. He plays rook g8, sacking the rook, because otherwise he will lose the queen and the game and be eliminated. So he checks, I take, he takes, I go king g7, bishop g4, trying to hold the pawns. The knight is still very well placed, as it stops ideas like queen f4, queen e5, creating the battery on the diagonal. But here I play queen to e7, and now he plays queen a8. White does not want to trade the queens. If you trade the queens after takes rook e7, white can try bishop c8 to push b6, b7. But after rook c7, let's just say bishop a6, for example, rook to c3, b6. Here I can play rook to a3, and now white's gonna have a lot of problems down the road. If you push the pawn, I take the bishop. Bishop covers the square, and if you go bishop b5, I have rook b3, again attacking the bishop and the knight. You move the bishop, take the pawn, GG, why not? So he plays queen a8. Now I go queen to e2, trying to capture the knight on d3, and he plays queen a1, only move here. If you were to play a move like queen takes d5, there's queen to f1, which is checkmate because the king cannot move up to g2 or h2 here. So he plays queen a1, covering the f1 square and checking the king. I go king g8, plays b6, and now I play this move rook to c3, sacking the rook on the c3 square here. If white takes the rook, of course, queen f1 once again is checkmate, and now the knight is completely dominated. There really are no squares at which the knight can jump to, and it is effectively GG. So Karthik plays queen g1 here. I play king f8. I could play rook takes d3. It's still good enough. But after bishop f5, there's a fossil at the very least. Maybe white can even play f4 here. No reason to allow any of this. So I go king f8, sidestepping any fossils on the g file. He plays the move knight to c1. And now I go queen c2, and the knight is trapped. The knight cannot go to any square without being captured here. If b7, I will simply trade off, and the bishop is covering the critical queening square. So with white losing the knight, there's nothing white can do. And my opponent, Karthik Venkataraman, resigns in this position. I win the second rapid game of the match. I win the match, and I move on to the second round, where I'm going to be playing against the Hungarian talent Benjamin Gladura. So you guys probably are wondering, what are my overall thoughts? As I've alluded to a few times already in this recap, my opponent, in my opinion, very, very underrated player, very, very strong. My guess is that probably he's from India, doesn't have enough opportunities to go travel and play high-level tournaments, if I had to guess, because he played way better than, I think, at 25-65, which is what his rating is. In my opinion, he played around like at least at 26-20, 26-30 level, and his general intuition and critical moments when he was low on time, both in the first classical game as well as the first rapid game today, when he defended like a madman, it simply shows his class, and I expect his rating to jump by at least 50 points in the next couple of months if he's able to play. So a lot of credit goes to my opponent. He put up a great fight. At the end of the day, I find a way to win. A little bit of a scare, but we move on. We take the win. And as I said, I'm going to be playing against Benjamin Gladura in the second round. So of course I'll be back tomorrow with another recap. I do believe I'm starting with the black pieces, but we now revert back to the classical format of 2 games, 1 with white, 1 with black. And we'll see you guys after tomorrow's recap. But at any rate, I'm going to relax, try to enjoy after surviving the scare in the first round, or I say my first round, second round of the FIDE World Cup. So I'll be back with a recap tomorrow after I play Benjamin, but I hope you guys have enjoyed it. Make sure to hit that subscribe button below if you haven't already, and I'll be back tomorrow. Hope you guys enjoyed it. See you soon. Bye.